Hello, everyone. My name is Simona Hunt, and I work for the education team. So I will be helping the presenters to facilitate this call with you folks today. This is an AUS training on contract audits. Your presenter will be Stephen Clement, who is a
Hello.
great presenter.
Thank you.
Hi, Stephen.
Hey, everybody.
And he will be facilitated by Martin Wallace, who is exceptional at uh, looking at questions in the chat and responding to those, as well as Stephen doing the same at the end of the call. So I'm just going to ask a couple of things of everyone. The first thing is to make sure that your microphones are off. The second is to make sure that your cameras are off. And the third is to let you know that I am recording this because if folks need to access this information later just to get more details or look at something that you might have missed, that will be there and the link will be provided to you folks as well to get access to those materials, including the recording. The last thing I'll tell you is as we go through the presentation, it's normal that folks will have questions to ask. So you have two options. You can either type your question in the chat box as we're going, and Martin will do his best to answer your question, or you can wait to the end of the presentation and you'll have both Stephen and Martin a tag team in answering those questions. Either way, they're going to get you the best possible responses by the end of the course or at a later point if they have to go back and research. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn this over to our great presenters. Stephen, when you're ready to go, these folks are yours.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another session of the AUS training series, where all topics tie back to the key tasks identified in the AUS position description, or PD. Because since the PD says what we have to know how to do, this class series focuses on the skills and topics that speak directly to what the PD says. If we can get the fundamentals covered, we'll do great things and get top shelf performance evaluations every year. In this class, we're going to look at a function the AUS performs, and that is auditing contracts. I'm Stephen Clements, as Simona mentioned, and I'll be your guide through this topic. I spent several years in VA contracting, switched sides to the good life of being an AUS, and earned the highest certification in contracting, the FACC Level 3. My lovely assistant and fellow Wisnick AUS, Martin Wallace, who's also a FACC Level 1, will be monitoring the chat and helping out, because I might ask you some questions along the way, and as Simona said, he'll be happy to answer your general questions. If you have one specifically for me, as she mentioned, hold that to the end of the class, and we'll show you at the end of the class where to get these slides, in case you need to know. And so let's kick things off by asking the question, what is a contract audit? Please put your answer in the chat.
Is that where the IRS contacts me? And,
no.
no.
Don't
Different
air your
audit.
dirty laundry here.
Different audit. I gotcha. Okay.
It's a whole different ball of wax. Ooh.
waiting for responses.
My condolences, Marty.
Google is your friend.
So contract audits, what are they?
William Lauka said, reviewing a contract for discrepancies.
And everyone agrees with William. Well,
apparently, I think so. That's either that
stuff.
or here comes some more. Maria Dalziel, monitoring contracts for accuracy issues. Julia Mitchell said, review of contracts to ensure the contract is in compliance. So, I mean, most pretty accurate answers. And there's another one. Christopher Langley said, ensure contract is meeting its required performance. Also ensures language for compliance with records, information, safety, etc. So,
all right, well, that sounds pretty good, and we're going to talk more about that. But the intended audience for this class is the AUS. All are welcome. So if you know a purchasing agent, inventory manager, or a supervisor, or a contracting specialist who might be interested in this, feel free to pass the invite to them in the future. But this is written for you, the AUS. Because we're going to talk about why this is important for you and what you specifically are supposed to do with this. Our task and purpose in this class include to familiarize the AUS with what goes into performing contract audits. Our purpose in doing so is to ensure the AUS is properly equipped to independently verify the contract terms and conditions are being followed. And our desired outcome is that attendees will learn a tool, which I will show you, for providing contract administration oversight. And we'll meet our task and purpose by looking at topics such as what are contract audits? What are these things? What does the AUS have to do with them? How do we do them? And how do we document our audits? As we go through the class, we'll look at what the interpretive sources have to say about auditing contracts, and we'll review an example audit together. And since I asked you for a definition, I'll give you one because I like to define terms to make sure we're on the same page. And a good definition will help identify roles and key tasks involved. When I mentioned the term contract audit, well, what do I mean? There's no definition in the FAR, VAR, or interpretive sources, nor do those sources tell us how to audit contracts. Now, there is a FAR Part 42 entitled Contract Administration and Audit Services that sounds like it should tell us what we do on this topic, but in fact, it mostly talks about the auditing functions assigned to the Department of Defense for the entire federal government and not what we would do with these things. I mean, it's helpful stuff, but it's not something that we're going to put hands on for most of that material. So, as I conceive it, and for purposes of this class, a contract audit is the review of a contract, its terms, and whether those terms are being complied with or not. We document our review findings and keep those as records on file because written records inform future decisions. Unwritten records are meaningless. They give us no leg to stand on, and they don't help us when trying to ensure contractors perform as promised. A contract audit is not making yourself the contract core. The core has defined duties that are hands-on with the contract on behalf of their contracting officer, whereas an audit is a hands-off higher level view of the contract and the things taking place that concern it. It is not an attempt by us to perform the monitoring functions outlined in a contract's quality assurance surveillance plan or QASP. We're not trying to take ownership of this contract. I mean, we might own it, but we're not trying to take other people's work off their plate. Because when it comes to the QASP, surveilling quality assurance issues should be done in real time by the people who own the contract, not by an auditor. A contract audit, however, can be done at any time, including after a contract has expired, to see if the intentions of the contract met the reality of the contract's execution. And a contract audit is a paper exercise that should not take up too much time, but can yield useful and actionable information for you and your customers. The contract audit covered in this class is a method of analysis I developed to provide an oversight tool when I had to start from scratch and making a wall-to-wall inventory of my organization's contracts and seeing what people were doing with them. And so that's what it is. Well, what's the AUS's role regarding contract audits? I say that we're supposed to be doing them, but please put your answer in the chat. Why is this something that an AUS should care about? Martin, what do we got?
Nothing yet. Slow, slow. Network is slow. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. William Locke says it's part of our core duties.
So it sounds like William is leading the pack today.
Oh, he's all over it.
He's all using that big brain power. Loving it, loving it.
Either that or he got the slides early. I'm not too sure.
Ah.
Ambria Severance says to ensure accuracy of info on contract.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to tell you what the AUS has to do with contract audits because I checked the AUS PD to see what it had to say. Here are key lines I found. If you're an AUS and have not read the AUS PD, you absolutely should. As you can see from the quotes, The AUS is supposed to be an expert on post-contract award activities, including contract implementation and oversight. And our first duty as contract liaison identifies that the AUS has important roles to play after our customers' contracts are awarded. We are to monitor and record our findings of contract performance to help ensure we're getting what we paid for. And this is whether we're a core or whether we're not on that particular contract. We do reviews, reports, briefs, and audits. The PD continues describing this role. And even if we aren't the contracts core, we oversee contract compliance, monitor contract expenditures, and report on deviations from the contract terms that we find. PD factors 1-7 and 5-3 reinforce the points we've already touched on. So why do we have that role? Well, in 2016, the AUS position was created to advise our customers on this and other topics. And as our facilities resident contracting experts, it is our duty to use our expertise to help our customers make the purchasing arrangements they need to serve our people and our veterans and to assist our customers with contract oversight once a vendor is selected. And we can use the auditing process that we're going to go over later to spot smoke, which may lead us to fire. In this case, fire means a contract with problems because they don't all go smoothly. Not all of them are perfect. And if in a high level review of a contract and its implementation, we see some things that don't add up, then we know we need to ask some questions and investigate further with the key people involved. Maybe they can tell us why everything makes sense and there's in fact no problem. But maybe they need to take corrective actions and we helped catch the problem. A few slides ago, I mentioned other people were also involved in contract admin and in the contracts that we audit. And those people also have roles to play with contract oversight and the audit process. The customer, the end user and the core, if it's not the same person, have the primary responsibility for contract oversight. After all, it's the customer receiving the goods or services and usually not us or contracting. And the CO is rarely co-located with the point of delivery, and even more rarely is the one watching the contractor do the work or accepting delivery of the items. Most COs spend their time moving from one contract package to the next and spend very little time on actively managing a contract once it's awarded. This isn't a knock on them, not in the slightest. It's just a description of the demands of their workload. They don't have the time to do this stuff, and they're not set up to do it effectively. They're not in the warehouse. They can't see the supplies coming off the truck and signing for them. So when a customer, core, or AUS raises an issue to the CO, that's when the CO will jump in. And if none of those people raise issues to the CO, nothing's going to happen because the CO doesn't know what's going on and the problems will continue. And when modifications such as option years need to be done, the CO is the one who'll handle that. They'll make that happen. But other than that, the CO's role in contract administration is tiny compared to the customer and the core. Procurement Guide Part 842 speaks to contract administration, and contracting also has their own version of contract audits. However, their audit is more concerned with proper record keeping in ECMS instead of contract term compliance. That's generally not what they're most interested in their audits. The vendor also has a role to play in contract oversight. They're to provide information we need when we ask for it, to verify performance and delivery issues. And some vendors provide the QASP that we use on a contract. That's a perfectly legal thing by the FAR. Some vendors provide usage information. They report on small business subcontractor participation, and they allow us to audit their records when we need to do it as part of our own. And let's take a minute to delve deeper into the roles our customers and cores have to play in contract administration. And all this is gonna come together by the end of this class. Since our COs aren't on site, don't work with the requirement every day, and it's not contracting's money being spent, it's our customers and cores who own contract administration. This is their responsibility. They're the ones who wanted the contract. the ones for whom it was made, and it's their money on the line. They have every reason to properly own this role. Again, just because I'm saying we need to audit these contracts doesn't mean we need to take ownership of it if it's not, an AUS's contract to properly own. And the two main duties our customers and cores have are reporting on contractor performance and validating that we got what we paid for. On the slide, you can see lists of tasks that go into both duties, and these are taken straight from the Customer Reference Guide, Appendix F, Contracting Officers Representatives. It's a good read. Just past the section where the CRG talks about the AUS job series, you'll see these lists. And I included a link in the presenter's notes if you want to go check that out yourself. The customer and the core are required to create these reports, and more details on each type are in the CRG. Each of these reports go into the core's contract files and are also to be sent to the CO so the CO can keep informed of how things are going. I draw your attention to the performance evaluations, and those are critical for keeping bad contractors away from our customers. If you get a scoundrel of a contractor who doesn't do anything right, doesn't show up on time, and you record their failures, your CO and other COs can use that information to make sure they don't give them more contracts. You and your COs can use these past performance records when grading solicitation responses if past performance is one of your evaluation factors. And let me tell you, one time when I was a CO, I was working on a boiler contract, and the customer was dead set. They wanted the same person that they always had. It's some small business to keep doing it. But I saw no room to justify that, so I competed it. Large business wound up winning it. And then after we got done with our on-site kickoff meeting with the new vendor, my customer told me, I'm so glad we got these guys. The old guys were terrible. And they didn't tell me that one time until that moment when it was already too late for me to use that information for any useful purpose. The customer just sat on that, decided not to tell me this contractor didn't do what they said they were going to do, didn't deliver on everything that they said they were going to deliver on. If you are one of those people that keeps that information to yourself, you're wrong. Tell your CO, write it down, put your name on it, because that is how we do that is one of the ways we do quality assurance. Okay, now I'll talk myself back from my rant. So when it comes to paying our bills, they also have to make sure we pay for only what we receive, our customers and our cores, and that we are receiving what we wrote we wanted in the contract. Sometimes invoices are screwed up. Sometimes we're billed for things we didn't ask for and didn't receive, or the vendor did not include the information in the invoice that we asked them to give us. And a lot of customers, they get a bill, not their personal money, so they don't look at it that hard, and they authorize payment without checking to see if it's right or not. That's one way how fraud, waste, and abuse happens. I know we all have to do annual classes on that, and spoiler, that's a bad thing, that fraud, waste, and abuse happens. And I just recently heard of a scrap of CO I know had to get involved in because for years this vendor has been billing us for items not in the contract, and the customer hasn't paid any attention, just keeps hitting the pay button, and that's not what right looks like. And so now that CO is trying to get that unscrewed, but the contractor loves getting this extra money. So they're pushing back saying, well, hey, this is how we've agreed to interpret the contract. So you need to keep giving me this money. And sadly enough, by FAR principles, that's a feasible leg for that vendor to stand on. So don't give them that. And don't let your customers do that. And fundamentally, this oversight is important because a contract is a collection of words saying who gets what, when, where, how, and for how much. These are legally enforceable documents. We need to know that we're getting what we asked for and paying for what we received. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, contract administration takes a back seat when it comes to the excitement of making shiny new contracts. A lot of people take the fire and forget approach to contracts, where there's a push, push, push to get a contract ordered because we have this year money, we'll lose if we don't spend it right now, and then everyone walking away once that award button's been hit. They don't pay any attention. They think they're good to go. The award of a contract is the beginning of that contract's life, not the end. That's why the concept of contract administration is an equal partner to contract formation, or in terms of the AUSPD, our roles in contract administration are just as important as our roles as contract liaisons. And we need competent contract oversight by every person involved. We as AUSs need to audit contracts because audits help ensure we get what we asked for. Because if we didn't get what we asked for, we got taken advantage of. And if we get taken advantage of, we're wasting taxpayer dollars. And every dollar wasted is a dollar not helping a veteran. And to emphasize the important, why it's important for us each to do our due diligence when it comes to contract admin, I should tell you that the people involved in making and performing contracts are not the only people doing audits. Earlier, I mentioned the FAR talks about how DoD audits everybody, and they do. They audit all our contracts. And as a different example, yesterday I received a VAO newsletter dated September 28, 2022, titled Agencies Contracts Need Some TLC. This story is about when the Bureau of Prisons Office of Inspector General looked at 4 of their contracts and found all kinds of problems. Their OIG found their acquisition planning and market research were not up to snuff. The contract was written to encourage the vendor to drive costs up and not down. Their record keeping was terrible, and the customer wasn't following their own contract. Now, we have an OIG too, and they also do audits. The GAO also audits every agency from time to time, and they usually have a lot to say about how the VA is not doing a good job with our contract admin. Now, believe me, if you haven't experienced it for yourself, when an auditor tells your boss how chewed up your contracts are and your boss asks you for an explanation, that's not a good place to be. If they ask you, where's your copies of all these documents, and you never even made a copy of any of those documents, you can't make them then. That is the wrong place to be at the wrong time. But if you have it all and it just wasn't where the auditor looked, you can say, well, here you go. Here's all my receipts. I'm good to go. And that's a good place to be. And it's far better to confidently be able to show your work and explain how you did your job. So how do we audit contracts? How do we do these contract audits I'm talking about? We know what they are and why they're important. If we can fix mistakes before other people find them for us, that's a much better place to be. But what's involved? What do we need to look at? So in the next few slides, we're going to look more into each step. And these steps are: get a copy of the contract. For that contract, identify if there is a master contract that this is a part of, because not everything's a standalone contract. Read what the thing has to say. And when you're reading it, identify what it actually requires. What does it want to get? What's the point of the thing? And the contract pricing. How much should you be paying for any of the things that are coming with the contract? Can you check your actual prices paid to verify that you're paying what the contract says you should be paying? And you need to track your funding utilization. You can check to see what your burn rate is on your dollars. And you need to take notes. You need to document your findings of what you found when you looked at all these things. That's basically the key steps of doing a contract audit. It's pretty straightforward. And to go deeper into it, for step 1, find a copy of the contract document. Here you're looking for copies of contracts you don't already have on hand. If your facility just awarded a new contract, get a copy of it. Perhaps you'll have an experience like me, where you start as an AUS only to find out nobody's been tracking anything, and you have to start from scratch to build a complete contract inventory. Even the CO wasn't tracking, it wasn't keeping track of his own contracts, which fortunately is very rare. But so when I started as a WISNIC AUS, I had no idea what contracts a WISNIC had and how they were being used. The assumption by everybody around me was that nobody was using these things and there was no value in them. That's not good. While it took several months to fully research the WISNIC contracts we had and how they were being used, by searching for contract records in FPDS, the ECMS dashboard, and just asking people and looking through records that I could find, I discovered that the assumed level of zero usage turned out to be completely wrong. In fact, WISNIC blanket purchase agreements accounted for over $98 million in spending, with over 630 task orders placed. And remember, one task order generally replaces one standalone contract. And so that's a lot of saved time and effort in addition to money. And another important part of getting a copy of the contract into the AUS's hand is that the number of cores and customers who don't have copies of their own contracts is staggering. It's really disheartening. Like, this is supposed to be your contract. You don't have a copy of it? No, and the CO is ignoring me. Well, if you have a copy, you can solve that problem. And there's ways to find it, find copies of them if contracting is not getting back to you for whatever reason. And so you can be part of the solution. A related step is to find out, was the contract you're looking at made using an indefinite delivery vehicle or IDV, such as an IDIQ, a BPA, or a BOA? Or is the document you're looking at a modification? Because task orders, delivery orders, calls, modifications, none of those things are standalone, fully contained contract instruments. There will be more to the story. If there's a master contract, we need a copy of that too. And this is important because we need to see if the order placed off the IDV was in scope or not. You can only legally place an order off an IDV if what you're ordering is actually covered by the IDV's menu. You may or may not be shocked by how many people freestyle their orders and violate terms of IDVs. Once you have a copy of the contract, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of reading what the contract actually says. Not what you think it says, not what the customer thinks it says, what it actually says. As a CO, I encountered customers who were furious, just mad as all get out. Let's write very long emails with all kinds of angry words because they're mad with their vendors, because the customer wasn't getting what they wanted and what they said the contract should give them. So I listened to their problems and read the contract, and I could do nothing for them because the things they were mad about not getting were not in the contract. It's as simple as that. Read what the contract says. The most important parts for to read for us are the front page, which is usually a Form 1449. We'll look at one later. The statement of work or performance work statement, the part where they define what the requirement is, the price cost schedule, and if there's special sections identified in one of those documents that you should know about, like an appendice or appendix or an attachment. For example, on WSNIC BPAs, the list of locations authorized to place orders is usually important to note, because if the BPA has an authorized location list, then only the facilities on that list are legally able to order off the BPA. So if somebody else places an order, well, they didn't do that legally. For an audit, you can skip the QUASP and contract clauses section of the contract because those are too deep in the weeds for what we're doing here. And if you're the core, you should definitely read those items though, because this is your document. This is your contract. When reading the contract documents, do take notes. Record key details such as who's the CO, does it have a core, and who's the vendor. Also make notes on what did we actually buy. What does the PWS identify as the required goods and services? And under what conditions did we say we would accept them? For a high level overview, we don't need all the PWS details. We just need to identify the basic things that it requires. You know, what's the piece of equipment we're ordering? What's the service we're ordering? Just the bones of the requirement. And next, find the price cost schedule. This will tell you both the price elements used and the agreed upon pricing. When looking at the price cost schedule, identify if it's set up with itemized pricing or if it is a lump sum pricing scheme. Itemized pricing helps by clearly identifying the pricing tied to each item we're getting. So one widget costs $100, or widget Y costs $50, and you have a like a menu showing what each one of these things cost, and in total how much you would expect to spend. Alternatively, sometimes people take everything they're ordering and put it in one lump sum that doesn't tease out specific item pricing. There's pros and cons for both methods, but for an audit, we just want to identify which method was used. Getting back to contracts made using indefinite delivery vehicles, one thing to check is, do the requirements and price elements match the IDV terms, or are they for things not on the IDV? Modifications, are the changes within scope of the master contract? Are they wildly out of scope items? If so, there's a big red flags of contract noncompliance, because if you have a contract to order hot tubs, but your customer got a mod put on there to order airplanes, that's wildly out of scope, and something went wrong somewhere along the line. And so now that we've identified who the contract is with, who it is for, what it covers, what are its terms, and how it's priced, we need to verify how the contract's being used. One way to do that is to verify the prices paid on invoices received, because invoices can tell us a lot. They should identify what was delivered and how much is being charged in that delivery. I suggest checking IPS for invoices and seeing what they have to say. It's up to you to decide how deep a dive you want to do, because the IPS file might only have one invoice, or it could have monthly invoices going back for years. If you have a whole bunch of them, you could evaluate every invoice that you found, or you could pull a sampling of the invoices to look at. Just do some spot checking, and both are perfectly valid methods. The details we're looking for include: are the prices invoiced for the correct amounts according to the contract? Are the invoices for items on the contract? Can we identify what these invoices are even for? Take notes on what you find. And then for utilization, what is the funding burn rate? There's many tools used to track funding expenditures. I've seen some AUS teams develop their own tools to do so. You can manually add up invoices and check the totals against the contract's obligated funds. And there are Power BI trackers that automate tracking burn rates for you. Is there plenty of money left on the contract for the period of performance, or has the customer already spent more than was obligated? Because one of those is a problem and one is not. You take notes of that. And comparing the requirements you found in the PWS to the invoices, are there things that we required that haven't been delivered? That might be a undelivered order or UDO. If you found any, you should definitely take a note of that. So you can ask the customer and the CO, hey, did you get everything you were looking for? Is something missing? And so for all those notes that you would be taking along the way, is there a special form you use to record them for a contract audit? There is not. There is no official form we have to use. I start by recording the key details on a Word document, and when I'm done, I save that as a PDF. And if I don't find a problem worth talking about, I could put the audit in my contract file and move on, or I could send the audit to the customer and the CO so they can use my audit report as part of their required contract admin documentation. Because after all, it doesn't hurt anybody's feelings to have proof that they're doing things well. But if I find a problem, I send that audit to the CO and the customer to discuss what I found. Perhaps everything's fine after they show me their math, and I would update my audit report to reflect that. Now, when it comes to taking corrective action, it's entirely on the customer and the CO to do so. But I would make myself available as a resource to advise and assist them on how to improve their situation. And these reports, they can go into your eCore file if you have one of those. And the CO can put them in their contract briefcase. And I have for every contract that I have oversight on, I put my audits and my final audits in there. So if I ever want to go back and look at that contract file, I got them all in one spot. I've got everything relevant in one place. And if you find problems to report, you could use a form the CRG gives us, which is the contract deficiency report. And I've got that linked on the slide to take you right to it. Okay, so for our example, I'm going to step you through my audit process and show you an audit I've done. While my contract inventory may be different from yours, because I do mostly blanket purchase agreements that don't carry 2237s with them, whereas I imagine most of y'all do. The tools and the principles we're going to cover can still help inform how you can perform contract oversight. Every month, On the first of the month, I audit usage on all my contracts, and I've researched and established a known inventory of contract instruments I should monitor. And as new ones are awarded, I add those to the list and start checking them. And every month, I take those contract numbers, drop them in FPDS, and search for task orders and modifications that I haven't seen before, because that'll tell me what the new usage is. Now, my systems analyst for the WSNIC, I also give those contract numbers to him, and he can search in Vista databases to see if there are other orders that have been placed that FPDS just didn't pick up on for whatever reason. He can also track to see if there's any government purchase card orders being made using my BPAs, and then I can count that towards the contract utilization. You know, and that's what I do every month. But these audits, the contract audits, I do those on the specific contract documents, like a task order, a modification, and the like. And all these details allow me to monitor long-term contract usage to see how these things are getting used, if they're meeting the intent or not. And I pull copies of the new contract actions I find, which allows me to do these audits that we're talking about. So we're going to go on Safari. I'm going to show you what my contract audits look like. Some screen sharing here. Okay, so I'm going to start by checking in FPDS. We're going to take one of my BPAs, one for medical gas cylinders, and we're going to see what new activity has been going on with that thing. And you go to the search bar. You will have to delete this text. It does not auto disappear. And my BPA I want to check is this one. All right. So here I've got a big list that goes on for 4 pages. And apparently I've got 113 contract actions in FPDS, which, if you're not familiar with FPDS, this is a accessible to the public database that records key details about every federal contract. It is very useful to look into this thing, because you might find all kinds of usage that you weren't tracking about what's going on at your facility or with your contracts. Now, it comes out unsorted, because you see the first one it gave me is from 2019 and the second one's from 2020. And then this one's earlier in 2020 than this one. So it is not in order. So I want to go over here and click date signed, because then it will put it in order from most recent to oldest. And we see here that you have each contract action is going to have one data panel, looks like this. And there's more information we'll look at here in a minute, but just to give you an orientation of this, we see, okay, here is a task order number right here, and P001. That means this is a modification to this task order. If you see something with a PO over here, or P0, that means it's a modification to an existing contract. And then we see this is the vendor it was signed with, and this is the date it was signed by the CO, and here's the BPA that this task order was made using. And you get some other key details like NAICS and PSC codes, and you also see how much was this thing for. So this was 15 grand of new spending. Now, if you look down here, you'll see there's another modification to a different task order. And one of the things I'm checking when I'm going down this, because I searched for the BPA number, right? Well, it's only going to pull stuff with that indefinite delivery vehicle here. But I also want to make sure that this vendor matches who I know is supposed to be on this BPA. And in this case, it does. So that's not a problem. But if this vendor did not match who's supposed to be on this BPA, that's one thing that I should check out and see what's going on. Here we see this modification was to do a decrease. Okay, well, that's good to note. And then we got more. That's another decrease. This was a no cost modification of that order. And the particular example I want to take you to, we're going to scroll down to about April. And let's see where we Here we go. This one right here, we're going to take a look at that. And so that's the task order number. It was for this amount of money, signed April 20th of 2022. And I want to see some more information about it. So I'm going to click on view. And then I've got all this information available to me that I'm not even looking at a copy of the contract at this point. This is just publicly available information that I can still get a lot of use out of, because up here, what kind of contract is this? Well, it's a BPA call. And some date information. Prepared user. This is usually who got this thing started in FPDS, usually not the contracting officer who signed it, but like a contracting specialist that's working with the officer. And if I have questions, I could, well, I could cut out this part right here. This will always get you a bad result if you leave this number um, in Outlook, but the rest of this email should be right. I could ask that person. Here would be the approved by. This is the contracting officer that signed this. So if I have questions, I could contact them. I'm going to show you one way to get a copy of the contract, but if I can't get it through that method, I could contact both of these people and ask for a copy. And then we've got the referenced IDV right here, the award number of the task order right there. 3600 means this is for the VA, but that's not a surprise. You got the date it was signed. Then you have the period of performance information. Starts that date. The task order ends that date. Action obligation. This is how much money is being tied up by this task order. And if this task order had options for like additional years on it, these would be bigger numbers than this. So say it was for 2 years, it might be for $19,000. And so this would still be for 9,500. This would be for like 19,000. That would be for 19,000. I would know that this is for multiple years, which should be reflected over here, or could be reflected over here. But this is just 1 year funding. This is for 1 year. Makes sense. I see here, this is for the money's coming out of Big Spring, Texas. So there you go. I know what facility is being serviced by this task order. And it's in VISN 17. Says it right here. The Network Contracting Office 17 made it, and they're only going to make a contract for VISN 17. And we got information about the vendor. We got more information about the vendor, like what kind of small business category they fit in. Some more information about the contract. In this case, it's a bunch of no's and not applicables, which is fine. Principal place of performance. Again, we get confirmation it's going to be Big Spring, Texas. And then this is talking about what we're actually buying. They have a description here, medical gas cylinders. Okay, that makes sense because my BPA is for medical gases and renting the cylinders. So this looks like it's going to pass the smell test. And then we got PSC code, we got a NAICS code. Everything's looking good. If we needed to know if this thing was competed or not, this is where we would look to find if this contract action received competition, and if so, what type. Because here it says competed under simplified acquisition procedures as an SDVSB set aside, and there were 2 offers received. Okay, well, that could be useful information depending on what I find to be useful. So now to get a copy of this contract, I don't want to bother these people just yet because I have means available to me to do it. I'm going to go to the ECMS dashboard. And all of you can get access to this. You can't go into ECMS, but you can go to this dashboard. And if you go over here, this action summary report, you see a bunch of different categories you could look at. For planning, if you have an ACT plan number or an AP number from Force, you can put that in here, click submit. And if there's a document available related to the number you put in, you'll get it. Funding, you got your 2237 number, you want to find a copy of that, bam, you do the same thing. Procurement, this would be solicitations. You want a copy of a solicitation? You can do that here. Award, this is what I'm interested in now. So if you have a standalone contract, a C-type contract, you put that contract number right here. If you have a purchase order, so that's a FAR 13 contract, that goes in here. If you put a purchase order number in here, and remember, I'm saying purchase order from the FAR, not purchase order from Vista. That's a whole different thing. then if you put a purchase order number in here, you're going to get nothing because the system doesn't recognize it. You put it in here, just leave this blank. If you're looking for a modification of either of these things, make sure to include whatever you're looking for there, along with the modification number here. It'll give it to you. And if you're using an IDV like this BPA, put the BPA number up here, and I could look for a copy of that by itself, hit submit, or I could put, I want a particular task order, BPA number here, task order number here, hit submit, it'll get me there. Now, this system is not fast and it is not reliable. About half the time I use it, it crashes on me when I make the request. So maybe it'll give us a response in a timely manner, and I can show you what that looks like. But if it doesn't in the next couple seconds, I've already got the documents for sake of this class, and I can show you. But there will be something available, even if it's just basic overview information. Oh my word, it loaded. So here we have information that looks a lot like some of the stuff we saw in FPDS. And then we've got connected actions, like things that are related to it. So if I wanted to look at the 2237, I could click on that. If I want to look at the ACT plan, I could click on that. If I want to look at the solicitation, I could go there. If I want to see the master contract, I can look there. But I want this public documents. I'm going to click on that. And this is where I can get copies without having to bother anybody else. And bam, there we go. There is a signed copy of the task order right there, which is where I got the copy I'm about to show you. And this was an incredibly useful tool for me building my inventory of contract documents. So here is a copy of the task order I got from there. So we'll take a quick look at this. So here's that first page, that cover page, that standard form 1449 I told you about. They're all going to have basically the same information. What's your 2237 number? What's your master contract number? What's the effective date of the contract? If this is a task order, what's that? If this is a solicitation, you'll see that there. What date it got issued, because this form also gets used for issuing solicitations. Who's a point of contact I can get more information out of. It's all right there. Who issued the contract, like what contracting office made it, so NCO 17. How is it competed? Was it set aside? Was it unrestricted, full and open? That'll be there. Who's it going to? Big Spring, Texas, makes sense. How does a vendor get paid? Here's instructions. Who is the vendor? Right here. A basic description of what the task order's for. Okay. Medical gas cylinders for Big Spring, Texas. And here's your Vista purchase order number, or as contracting would call it, an obligation number. That could be useful information for you. Point of contact information, all your accounting data, how much the thing's for, signature. All right, this is a signed document. Here we see the table of contents. It's jacked up because these should be pages. This is something the ECMS will do if you don't code things right. But this isn't anything an AUS would do. This is completely on the contracting side. But, you know, doesn't look great. We got contact information for the contractor. We don't have contact information for the CO, but we had that on the first page. This specifies we will pay invoices monthly and in arrears. Good to know. After we've received it, a month later we'll pay it. And then we've got the details of what do we want. We want to service Big Spring, Texas. We want these gases. Here's terms about what when we want it delivered, how we'll accept it. Who's going to be monitoring performance? So the logistics office is going to be doing that. And here's your price cost schedule. This gas, so here we have line item pricing, so itemized pricing, which makes it easy to check, are we getting charged the correct amounts or not? So air compressed medical costs this much per each unit, and for 120 units, it's going to cost us this much. And it just goes on like that. And delivery again to Big Spring, looking good. Oh, and they gave contact information for who's going to receive it at Big Spring. Looking down, now we're into the contract clauses. For an audit, we don't care about that. It's very unlikely we would care about that for an audit. So we got all this stuff. So how do we know if any of this is actually covered by the BPA? Well, we can look at the BPA. And we've got the 1449 talking about the same stuff we had just covered. Contact information. It says invoices upon receipt and acceptance. That's fine. The task order, we usually write these things to where the task order can specify certain things, how the facility that's ordering it wants it to be done. So that the two of these don't match there is just fine. We've got some, price cost schedule. See attachment A for pricing schedule. All right. So that means we need to find this attachment A. And so I happen to have the attachment A. I know it's a surprise, right? And it is this big old spreadsheet over here that because our price cost schedules in the WSNIC can be hundreds and hundreds of lines long across different business. Sometimes we have to use a spreadsheet instead of building it, in the NECMS. But so we want gases and services for Big Spring, Texas. We're in VISN 17. So let's see if Big Spring, Texas is listed. We got Waco, Harlingen, Dallas, San Antonio. Is this even an authorized location to be placing an order? Big Spring, there it is. So they're on the list. They can place orders, and they can place orders for these things right here, these particular gases and services that are this size, and they should be charged these prices for a fill of this size of a cylinder of this gas, and to rent this size of a cylinder, they should be paying, there's a column for that too. And for these services, for every time they get one of these services, so each time they should be paying this much, there's a column for that too. So it would be a pain for me to go back and forth between these documents to show y'all what how they compare. So we're going to go back to the slideshow where I conveniently have all that next to each other. So we did find that all the items on the task order are on the BPA. Good to go there. They are for the right sizes. They are for the right units. And then we've got the BPA price for the gas fill or the service. And we have the BPA price to rent a medical gas cylinder. Then we have the task order priced for the to fill for a fill of the gas, and the task order price to rent the gas cylinder to the cylinder itself. You might notice the task order pricing is a lot higher than the BPA pricing. And in this case, it's over twice as much as the blanket purchase agreement pricing. Okay, that tells me I've got a problem, or somebody has a problem somewhere. Every one of these line items are more expensive than these, and every one of these cylinders are more expensive than what we had agreed to. And then all these services are more expensive than what we had agreed to as a WSNIC with the vendor. These are problems. So what do we do with that? What I did, since I don't, this isn't my money getting spent, and I didn't have anything to do with the CO that agreed to these prices in the task order, I wrote up my report. I sent it to my CO. I sent it to the ordering CO, sent it to the customer, sent it to the vendor, and asked some questions. And I got the conversation started there. But this is a big red flag and should not have happened. So that's what I did in that audit, and I'll show you what the audit actually looked like. It's this thing right here. It's pretty simple. I identified what contract I'm looking at. I specify that I'm doing an audit. Who's the vendor? What's the topic of the contract? And what kind of contract is it? It's a BPA task order. Who's it for and what VISN is it in? I checked. Big Spring is a covered location. They can place an order. Table of contents didn't look so good on the task order. The gases ordered are on the facility price list, so that's good. However, I did a sampling when I did this audit, so I checked 3 of the line items instead of all of them. And what I saw was enough to convince me we've got problems with this pricing. And So the pricing is out of compliance with the pricing terms when I went back and did more of it. Period of performance is 1 year. Task order is not compliant with BPA terms is what I put as my evaluation. And I included who the CO was that signed this thing, put my name, put my date. That's what my audit looks like. Pretty simple. Now, I want to show you a tool for looking at funding burn rate. And if you don't have a Power BI report, you will have somewhere near you a data or systems analyst that will be able to make one of these things for you. And if they don't know how to make it for you, get in touch with me. I'll get you in touch with my guy, and he'll show them what they need to do. Because these things are super helpful, and your leadership loves looking at stuff like this. I'm about to show you why. So this contract utilization report tracks how much money has been spent and how much money is left on every Vista purchase order number we have. And since this is for VISN 17, I've got them checked, and it's for Big Spring, which is code 519. I clicked on those, and this tells me everything going on at a high level with Big Spring Vista purchase orders. And so we got VISN, station, location, all that. The PO number or obligation number ends 20060. So I'm going to look for 20060. See what kind of funding burn rate we got going on. All right, here we go. And 20060. All right, so actually for some reason this has separate line items in here. Interesting. So I'm going to look at this one. Yeah. But I can look at all of them to see what the burn rate has been, what the utilization rate has been, and so on. And this looks like it's been updated since the last time I looked at it. But all three of these numbers put together should match the amount on the task order. And then I can look at how much of each of these has been spent. So it looks like out of the 9,000 plus, we've spent about $800, and we still have quite a bit of money left to go. The obligation expires on this date, so that's when my customer should be trying to deobligate that money, or within 30 days of that, trying to deobligate that money, make sure all their bills are good. And so, yes, this is a very powerful tool that automates the tracking of how much is getting spent on your contract. So I would highly encourage you to get a hold of them. Moving on. Here's a summary, a list of details I include in my audits. And if I record the details listed on my audit form, that'll give me a good overview of what's happening with the contract. Feel free to use this list, add to it, change it around, do whatever you find most useful in getting a high level look at your facility's contracts. And now that we've written up a sample audit report, or we've looked at one I wrote, let's summarize some key takeaways and finish up this class. Knowing how to monitor contract compliance is an AUS job, says it in the PD. Contract audits are an important tool for monitoring contract compliance. And the AUS role is an important part of the contract administration process because we have roles we're supposed to do because our name is acquisition and utilization specialist. Utilization, how are we using things? This is a key part of that. And auditing contracts provides a high-level overview of your facility's contract activity. While this is much time as we have to talk about this topic, I do have some suggestions for future study. These three courses involve different time demands, and there's a variety to pick from, but they're all related to contract admin. FACO 84 is a short self-paced class that talks about contract remedies, because if you find a problem while doing an audit, you might need to know what your options are to fix it or to advise your customers on how to do that. Con 1 of 27 is an instructor-led class that lasts 2 days, and it's required for those earning their FACSI level 1, which every AUS should do. As the title suggests, it's about contract management and administration, which is very important. And if all of contracting has to take that class, it might be helpful for you contracting experts to do it too. Finally, there's FCN 435, which is 40 hours, requires an instructor, and is also on contract admin and how to do it properly. So, as we're wrapping up, for my last question to you, my beloved, and exceedingly good looking and above average in every respect audience, did you find that this class helped you learn for the first time or refresh your knowledge of how to audit contracts, perform contract oversight, or just learn how to read a contract? If so, what did you find most helpful? If not, what did we miss? What would have made this more helpful? We want to make these classes as useful as possible, so please put your answer in the chat or send us an email. Either one's fine.
Robert Reynolds said, awesome refresh. Maria Dalziel, very informative. Thank you. William Lauka, love seeing someone use this dashboard successfully.
Good deal. Good deal.
So
And
there are lots
so
of good, positive
that
responses.
great, great. Well, feel free to keep those responses coming in. Since we're at the end of the formal time for the class, Martin and I thank you for your time, and we hope you got value out of it. But if you have any questions, comments, or things you'd like to talk about, we'll stick around as long as we have things to talk about. And while you're getting those questions together, I will show you where all these classes are at and drop a link in the...
Simone already dropped it.
Oh, Simone already got it. Well, I'll show you what the place looks like. And here you'll see every class we've given so far, listed in order given and by topic. And I would suggest, if you're new to this stuff, start here and then work in order, because we have these things laid out to where they all tie together and they will build on previous lessons as well. And in these, you're going to find things like the actual slideshow, a recording that we did, and you see these other documents. These are supplemental materials that go with what was actually talked about in the class to help you do what you need to do. There are also TMS courses already recorded, and some of them have already been loaded. Some of them are being worked on to be loaded for posterity's sake, so you can hand it to new people. Like go into TMS and take Steve and Martin's class, and that'll get you a basic start on all your AUS duties. And also remember, you can go into Cornerstone On Demand and self-register for 1 CLP for this external learning event. What I suggest you do is you take your meeting invite, print it as a PDF, and use that as your attachment. I'm the instructor, Stephen Clements, and just put a basic description of what the class was. You can copy paste it from the email invite, and you'll get a CLP for every one of these you do. All right, well, that's all I've got to say. Martin, do we have any questions ready to go?
No, I did a really good job this time answering them all.
Well, you always do a really good job answering them all.
No, I mean, actually, this time I was able to keep up.
Good deal, good deal. And if
Yeah.
anybody would like to unmute your mic at this point, feel free and ask your question that way.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, what do you got?
You had mentioned about going into Power BI.
Mm-hmm.
That I think somebody else just asked the same question. How can you show us how you can go in and get the information you were speaking on?
Okay, so every Power BI report is handmade by a data analyst somewhere. Is Aaron Peters on the call, because he made all these things, and it's going to be way too complicated for me to explain on this call. But get your data people in touch with me or in touch with Aaron, or you get in touch with us, and then we can make the connection to Aaron Peters, who is a Wisnik systems analyst, and he can show them how this is done. Apparently it's not that complicated. He's on. Feel free to message him. There he is in the chat. Start blowing up his inbox, because he can give you all the details you want.
So quick question on that. As a new AUS, I have to put a spreadsheet together of all of our active contracts and what to monitor. Is this how you would start that?
So I don't know, well, this isn't how I do it, but then again, as I said, my contracts, like my base contracts, my BPAs, they don't have any money on them, so I can't use this to track what's happening with that thing. But I can show you what I do, and that can give you a tool that is perfectly valid. Actually, I've got a couple different ways. So at this Wisnik SharePoint site, which I would highly encourage any of you to go to snatch copies of BPAs we have to help inform your own. Look at our expired contracts to see if there's something that you that you're looking for, but we don't currently have one for. Might be in there. There's also this useful stuff that isn't the Wisnik contract folder, and it's got all kinds of AUS training resources, a sample QUASP that you can take and customize however you want, and all kinds of other stuff. So I would recommend you check that out. But a tracker that I keep on here that other people can look at is this thing. It's just a spreadsheet, so nothing too complicated. And you got these tabs to go look at. This is a list of all the contracts that the Wisnik currently has. And it says what it's for, who the vendor is, what the award number is, when does the thing expire, and any notes like a significant action that's going on with it, like this one, medical gas cylinders. Well, these two, we currently have 2 awardees for medical gas cylinders. They're these vendors, these BPAs, and they both expire at this time. So I noted I've already submitted a new package to replace this, when to try to keep coverage going when that expires. And same thing here. So that's one way you can do it. This is how we track the statuses of all the contract packages we're working on that we've given to contracting. Because if your boss asks, hey, what's up with this procurement package for Tic Tacs? Well, I would have a listing with the AP number I got, or the ACT plan number I got from Force, the description of what it's for, its most recent status, its status update, who the CO assigned to it, when I sent it, and so on and so forth. I'll also show you, not this one, another spreadsheet that I use. Oh wait, no, I can get to it from here.
So if you were starting from scratch, you would reach out to your VISN COs to get your active contracts for the facility?
I would ask anybody I thought might have any lead on a on that topic. It could be your purchasing agents, could be your supervisor, could be anybody. Ask everybody, and don't be shy, because either they'll have it or they don't. And going to FPDS and just searching around, if you've got like any hint of a contract, if you put like key terms in here, it'll return key terms. It might not be awful specific, but that's one way to do it. You can, if you find a 2237 number or a modification number or just like partial information, come to this ECMS dashboard and look for it using these different tabs here. Because say you only have a solicitation number, toss that in there, and then it'll show you what it's connected to. And if an award was made off of it, it'll give you a link to go find that award. And then another thing I do, let me shrink this so we can get more detail in. This is the spreadsheet I use to keep track of what's being done with all of my contracts. So these are the ones that are active and being used. So here's the subject matter. Here's the number. Here's the vendor. Here's period of performance. Is there a price ceiling on it? How many task orders have been issued off of it? How many modifications have been issued off of it that had any dollar value? How many dollars have been spent on this thing? And then I've got a list of contracts I've got that no one's spent any money on yet. And then I've got a list of all my expired ones. I've got all this linked up to where, each contract, well, what was the total on each one? I can group all these together. And so the Wisnik has spent how much on bulk oxygen, like regardless of the contract, regardless of the vendor, how much have we spent on bulk oxygen in general? It's going to be this much. And I got all this information here. And I also track each month how many orders have been placed and how many dollars have been spent. Recently, I've started breaking that. I've been adding the number of modifications, so the total number of contract actions and total amount spent. So to keep a running tally of what we've done. And so these are some different ideas you could do to track this stuff. Does anybody else have another idea? Did I blow your mind, Danielle?
It looks that way.
Does anybody else have a way that they track their contract inventory that you'd like to share?
So Stephen, this is Marie, and when I joined Vision 23 about a year and a half ago, they didn't have a running total, so I had to do research like you did. But what helped me out was going to my NCO, and they sent out a pipeline report of what had been in ECMS over the last couple of years. They had it broke out by EPAs, option years, and what's ending in 365 days or less. So that helped me. But there was still some contracts that did pop up that should have on that report. And I did what you suggested. But for me, it was the ECMS pipeline report that comes out weekly to me.
Yep, a lot of NCOs will do that. You could also ask your fiscal people because they'll know where your dollars are and they'll know who's spending them. And even if they give you too much information, it's better to have too much information to try to use in your search than it is to not have enough. Because here's an example. When I did my first round of inventory of Wisnet contracts, I thought we had 230 total task orders that we had issued for about $66 million. But you see the next month, that number jumps to 630 task orders and $98 million. That's because between then and then, I discovered a whole cache of contracts that I didn't know we had, and a lot of people didn't know we had. And you just keep aware of what you got, and you know, if you have a SharePoint or not SharePoint, but a shared drive for your logistics office, go poking around in that. People squirrel away all kinds of stuff in there. It might be old contracts and information you can use to find these things. And when you get a hint of what's going on, check here, the ECMS dashboard, check here in FPDS. Because between the two of these things, you're probably going to find what you need to find. Well, and of course, asking people. So does that give you some ideas to start with? All right. Well, I'll assume that's a yes. And I did blow Danielle's mind. All right. Well, good deal. And that's one of the points of this Q&A time afterward is uh, the, to share tactics, techniques, and procedures. Like yesterday, we were on for an hour and 20 minutes after the class, just talking about stuff. And a lot of people shared documents they had, examples they had to give, advice on how to handle this type of contract or that type of contract, or this boss trying to use you this way, this way, that way. It ain't got to be this part of the meeting doesn't have to be just about contract audits. So anybody else has questions, comments, or topics, please, this is your time. This is your time. Are y'all too busy messaging Aaron to try to get your own Power BI going? I mean, it's helpful stuff. It really is good. Ah, Christopher Langley, you love seeing someone use the dashboard successfully. It's always like a little treat when it actually works. It always is. Oh. All right. Well, I'm not hearing anything, so either all else mics are out or We ain't got anything to talk about, so I'll give it 2 more minutes. And if I haven't got anything to talk about in those 2 minutes, then we will go ahead and call it for the day. Believe, yep, yeah, Martin already answered that question about Wisnik. And as I've touched on a few times in the class, Wisnik covers, let me get rid of this region right here. So VISN's 17, and then 19, 20, 21, 22. This is the Western States Network Consortium. Goes all the way from Texas over to Guam and the Philippines, and from deep in the south here up to Alaska. And that is where Martin and I, this is where our contract efforts are focused. And fortunately, I'd already come up with this idea to have these classes for the Wisnik area AUSs, and Simona Hunt and other folks in my leadership thought it'd be a great idea just to make this available to every AUS across the country. So if you go to the Wisnik contract site, just know that if you're not in 17, 19, 20, 21, or 22, you can't use those contracts to order off of, but by all means, cannibalize the ideas and the documents that you find. Use the pricing schedules there to help with your own market research and making your own version of the same contract. And that's, any way we can help, we'll be glad to do it. But just know, for when it comes to contract services, Martin and I, this is the area that we look at, and we don't go down into the facility level or even the VISN level. We operate at a tier of the VA that is above the VISN level. So I can't help you with your 2237 in Vista in Harlingen, Texas. I don't have access outside my wheelhouse. But if you need help with conceptual work, you can do that. All right, anybody else? Anybody else got anything? All right. Well, I appreciate y'all's time and some good conversation. Hope we help some people out, and hope y'all have a great day.